888. Oh, no, not 888. When am I going to get this phone number, Devin? This is pathetic. How come I can remember some stinking stock price from 10 years ago and I cannot get this phone number? 866-300-9298. I'm looking away from the screen so I can say this. 866-300-9298. You know, when you have a number that's in front of you all the time, folks, you don't even make even a feeble attempt to memorize it. So then you think, well, you've said it so many times, surely you know it. And I make that mistake. Anyway, Ann just took it off the screen for me. She's forcing me to remember. She just said there with an exclamation mark. She's taking it away from me. So now I got to remember it. But I can see it up there on the screen, 866-300-9298. I shouldn't have said that, Devin, or turn the screen off for me. Anyway, we're going to get to the phones. Folks, let me just recap what happened yesterday. The markets were down. The Dow was down 52, S&P down 5. And it looks like the markets aren't real thrilled. They're not thrilled with the budget deal in the sense that when it was announced, we didn't see futures going through the roof this morning. So right now, they're all about flat. I don't think it apparently the headline is anyway that U.S. stock futures are lower this morning because they're worried a little bit about the U.S. budget deal, but primarily because it could strengthen the case. In other words, if we had not gotten a budget deal by the 13th of December, when they said they would have one, that would have probably created a lot of tensions in the market, which would have kept the Fed hesitating from even thinking about doing any kind of taper. I've got an interesting perspective on central bankers in developed worlds right now. Now, you have heard me say this before. I'm not going to belabor it now, but maybe at the top of the next hour. But look, QE forever is really what I believe is going to be forever. And I think the same goes for the UK buying about 600. I think they're about 650 billion, if my memory serves me correct, a year. So we're 1.1 trillion, okay, a year with a budget probably, 10, 15 times bigger than the UK. It's probably bigger than that. And they're almost, they're not that far away from that. So it's pretty amazing. But the QE that is going on through developed nations, it's not going to stop, folks. It just, I've said this over and over again. It can't. It just can't. And maybe I'll talk about that at the top of the hour if I remember to come back to it. 866-300-9298. Let me go to Kevin. Kevin calling us from Minnesota. Hey, Kevin.
Hi, how you doing, Dan?
Good.
Good. I listen to you as often as I can each morning, and I guess my comment, and I'll listen off the air here, but when we elect these people and they run on the things that they say they're running on, and they show us these values, and then they all change, when they get in there, I can't believe that they're as ignorant to things that are going on as they may pretend. I listen to you. I feel the same way you feel from what I hear from you, that I'm just astounded at why are they doing this, and I wonder about that a lot. Maybe you might comment on, because if they're not that dumb, then maybe they're all fishing on the same lake, if not in the same boat, and got some kind of a plan for this country for later on, especially with recognizing and people finally saying how rich this nation is in resources, and how do you control this? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I do. Kevin, here's my thoughts on it. Now, I'll qualify it by saying I think you are probably a lot more accurate in your assessment that they can't be this stupid than I am. So I'm saying this, but at the same time, I'm agreeing with you and your assessment. But so I guess what I'm saying throws me in the category of wishful thinking. But here's what I just kind of feel in my gut as someone who spent a lot of time in Washington. I used to be in Washington 2 days a week for years, dealing with our legislators. And here's what I think. And this is kind of hard to imagine. When you live in a bubble and live in isolation, whatever that might be, if you're someone that lives in the out country of Alaska and you live there year in and year out and you don't have a TV and such, you're living in a bubble, good or bad, you're living in a bubble, and you lose touch. You just lose touch with what's going on in the world. And the bubble, sometimes it's hard to imagine unless you spend a little time there. The bubble that hovers over Capitol Hill, it has incredible power to create a total clueless kind of attitude in these men and women. It is amazing. So I do believe that I'm not saying they're stupid from an intellectual standpoint, an IQ level or anything like that. That's not what I'm saying. But I am saying that they're so isolated, so out of touch, that they believe if you work for a company that continues to tell you something over and over again until you start believing it, it's very difficult for you to function in any other way or on any other ideology than what you truly believe. They truly believe some of the idiotic behavior that they do. I've always said about companies, whether they're big, small, or whatever, as I've done consulting, I've just been asked to, I think I'm going to be doing some consulting for a small ministry here. And one of the things that I always try to warn them, if you are manipulating in any way, shape, or form your financial strength, if you do that, and I'll use Enron and WorldCom as an example, those executives weren't stupid. What they did was they manipulated their financial statements so much that they began to believe their financial statements. They actually believed, after looking at these certified audits over and over again, they actually started to believe, and then they make decisions based on a false sense of facts, the very facts that they've manipulated. So they've manipulated these financial facts, and then they start believing it. I believe that that's what's going on in Washington. I believe that because it is so hard. Because, like I said earlier, these guys are not stupid. They have intellect. They're just living in this bubble. Then you bring in and add in the lobbyist, and you go to what is going on with the lobbyists and what the lobbyists are pounding down their throats, and not to mention contributing to their campaign funds and such. Then at some point in time, they start believing it. So it is a total isolation from reality. It's a total isolation from reality. And I believe that they continue to believe this stuff. And so and not to mention, they just absolutely thrive. They love their jobs. They don't want to go out into the real world and get a real job. Their goal is to get reelected. It's their number one priority. Then they begin to think that their next priority is the good of the party, whether it be the Democrats or the Republicans. Everything becomes about the party. It becomes about the next elections. It's about the party gaining power and control. And that's what it's all about. So there is a true sense. I've always said this about the world of academia. If you ever work in and around the world of academia, come to the conclusion very quickly that there is a bubble in which they live, that they lose a sense of reality. if you think about the world of academia, we have professors that are incredibly intelligent. They know their discipline very, very well. And unfortunately, they start believing they know a lot about everything, because they're so smart about this particular thing. It's these bubbles and what we have in Washington. And that's why you see guys like Paul Ryan is a perfect example, all fired up when they come in and just start to begin to compromise, begin to waver, begin to change, begin to justify, begin to change how they feel. Marco Rubio, same thing. Begin to change the way they feel, begin to justify until they start dropping in the polls. Then they go back to where they were. Then they come back. We hear the campaign. You brought up a great point. They come in running on a platform. Once they get in Washington, they get talked out of the platform and they realize, I'm going to do whatever I got to do to stay here because it's the greatest job I ever had. I mean, it goes on and on. So I don't think it's just that. I think it's not a lack of intellect, but it is a lack. It is an ideology, and they say their principles. The problem is their principles change dramatically. Their principles aren't what they were when they come in. And I go back to what I say all the time. I want to know how a guy like Harry Reid comes into office worth about $300,000 and leaves worth about $9 million. I want to know how that happens because, trust me, they're not making that much money on salary. I mean, some of us would consider $170,000 a year a lot of money, and it is. I'm not saying it isn't, but it doesn't allow you to accumulate $10 million in a short period of time. So, it's, I don't know. It's so many things. I tend to think that I want to think that you're right. I really just believe that Washington, once you get into that cesspool, it's just really hard to get out of. And you begin, even though the stench is incredible, you don't want to get out. I know it's hard to believe, but anyway, great stuff. Let me go to Thomas in Georgia. Hey, Thomas.
Hey, brother, how you doing?
I'm doing good.
I am so glad that you wrapped up your inner conversation about money and power, because that is exactly what it is. Money equals easy power, and power equals easy money. And the easiest thing for this economy is to get the gasoline company, I would think, out of our pocketbook. I spend about $400 a month just in fuel to ride around town in my pickup truck. And then the second thing is this Obamacare. Everyone's talking about Obamacare costing so much money. Have we forgot about our Congress and senators who put in all the pork belly projects from both sides of the party?
Yeah.
To get their free money, their personal political interests? It's all about the money. Where can you go and get a job, work 1 year, and keep your salary for the rest of your life? Who gets $15,000 a year for clothing allowance? Is their clothes only good for 1 year?
Yeah.
It just burns my thinking that America is allowing this to go on in Washington. And it's not that they're stupid, by no means. They're very smart because they have manipulated the world in the United States to get their benefits and their payments, just like Harry Reid, from $300,000 to $10 million in just a short period of time. Who in the hell can make that kind of money in that short period of time? It's all about the money. It's not about what's good for the country or its people. It's about them and how much money they can accumulate. Another thing is, I guarantee if you go back and look at their portfolios, they are stocked out in petroleum. They got to be. So they're going to kill it off of us.
Yeah. Well, you know what, Thomas? Let me just cut you off as we come up to the break here. But you're right. I mean, power and money, corrupt everything. And you're so right. I mean, you hit the nail on the head on so many points. And one of the things that you said that I really appreciate and I like is the fact that, how you mentioned, which we don't do enough, you mentioned the American people keeping these people in office. And I don't know how we do it. But I'm a little, maybe I'm overly optimistic, but I'm optimistic in the sense that I think the American voter is alive and well right now, probably more alive today than at any other time in our nation's history. And I think they're realizing. You know, I just read an article this morning saying, I think it was, I'm not 100% sure of this, but I think it was 70% of the incumbents conservatives are being challenged by a conservative, a Tea Party conservative, are being challenged. That's huge. Now, the question is, can the American people, and will the American people vote in the primaries in record numbers? Because that's what's got to happen. It's all about the primaries. Everything that happens in Washington is about the primaries. It's not about general elections. It's about the primaries. So will we step up, the American people and the American voter, saying, this is my man that we're gonna get on the ballot and we're going to vote for him, and we got to get this guy out of there? Will we step up? Because I'll tell you something, and I've said this over and over again, then we're going to go to break. We're going to get back to the phones, 866-300-9298, 866-300-9298. Let me tell you, when our legislators come to the realization that if they don't do what they said they were going to do, what they promised they were going to do, if they don't do that, they're going to get fired by the very people that hired them. None of these guys would make it in the corporate world. They'd be fired. I ran a very large company, my own company, 180 people working for me. And the people that I love, that I hired, if they weren't doing what they needed to do, I had to fire them. And that's the way we've got to treat this, and we've got to do it. Let's see if we'll do it. 866-300-9298. I'll be right back.